This week we'll be exploring unsolved mysteries that range from a group of kidnappers and food saboteurs that went by the name The Monster with 21 Faces, to the mystery novel-esque Disappearance of a famous mystery novel writer, to one of the most famous UFO sightings in Africa. We will be covering these and much more. So without further ado, grab a drink. My choice today is black coffee with cream, and join me as we explore the unsolved mystery Iceberg. Really quick, I would just like to thank my Patreon supporters Ash M, Kelly Scott, and Foxy Nico. Every bit of support from you guys means the world to me, and if you'd like to tip a tea or coffee, there is the Ko-Fi link in the description. Or if you'd like to support through Patreon and see these videos 2 days early, there is a link to that as well. But now let's get into the first entry. To start off with, we have The Monster with 21 Faces. So this was a case that sounds like it's straight out of a movie or a novel or something. Even the name The Monster with 21 Faces was based on and inspired by another villain in a Japanese mystery novel, The Fiend with 20 Faces. So it was 1984 March 18th when two masked men armed with a pistol and a rifle broke into the home of Katsuhisa Izaki. Katsuhisa was the president of Izaki Glyco, which was this huge food processing company headquartered in Osaka, Japan, and Katsuhisa's night was only about to get worse. Now, the two armed men had broken into Katsuhisa's home using a key that they stole from next door, in which Katsuhisa's 70-year-old mother lived. Now, Katsuhisa's home had a security system, which makes sense for the CEO of a large company, but his mother's house just next door didn't really have much security, it seems. So they broke into her house, cut the telephone lines, held the mother hostage essentially, tied her up with these very same telephone lines, and then they forced her to give them the key to Katsuhisa's home. Because she was the mother, I guess she just had a spare key with her. So at around 9 p.m, the two men entered Katsuhisa's home. They tied up his wife, Mikiko, and their 7-year-old daughter. Mikiko actually offered the two men money, and one of them just said, "Be quiet, money is irrelevant," which is not really what you want to hear during a break-in. But again, they cut the phone lines for the house and found and abducted Katsuhisa naked while he was bathing, bringing him to a small warehouse on the other side of Japan. So what did these men want? I mean, they said that money was irrelevant, so they could want anything really, but they wanted money. At around midnight that night, they contacted another higher up at Izaki Glyco and directed him to a ransom note left in a public phone booth. This note demanded 1 billion yen and 100 kilos of gold, which all worked out to around $5 million or $15 million in today's money. So as they were panicking and worrying and trying to figure out what to do with this whole situation, should we not negotiate with terrorists? Should we hand over the money? How much time do we have really? Are there going to be other attacks? If we are going to give the money, what's the best way to hand it over? And during all of this, Katsuhisa escaped. After 3 days of being tied up in this warehouse, he was able to break free of the ropes and make his escape. He fled the warehouse, got to safety, but he was unable to identify his kidnappers or to give really clues of any kind, which is a bit unfortunate. So the kidnapping group was probably a little annoyed that their main bargaining chip had just escaped, and they weren't willing to give up their potential paycheck just yet. Over the next few weeks and months, several of the company cars at Izaki Glyco were set alight. A tub of hydrochloric acid was found inside of a Glyco building, and several letters were sent to Glyco, the media, and the police. One of them reads, "To Japanese police fools, are you stupid? There are so many of you. What on earth are you doing? If you are real pros, try catching me. There's too much handicap, so I will give you a hint. There's no fellows in the Izaki's relatives. There's no fellows in Nishinomiya police. There's no fellows in flood fighting corps. Car I used is grey. Food was bought at Daya. If you want a new info, beg for it in the newspaper. After telling you all this, you should be able to catch me. If you don't, you are tax thieves. Shall I kidnap the head director of the prefectural police?" They sent letters to the media basically taunting and degrading the police, saying how incompetent and useless they were. And one letter, which was sent to the media and Koshian police, read, "To police fools, You shouldn't lie. If you lie, you steal. I also sent this to Koshian police. Why are you lying? Don't hide things. Why are you complaining? You guys are having such a hard time, so I will give you a hint. I entered the factory from the side staff entrance. The typewriter we used is Panwriter. The plastic container used was a piece of street garbage. And it was signed the Monster with 21 Faces. Then, after taunting the media, the police, providing them with a bunch of clues that didn't really move the case forward in any way, the Monster sent their first letter directly to Izaki Glyco. The letter said that they had laced $21 million worth of the company's food with potassium cyanide, which is extremely deadly, by the way. And they threatened to put them onto store shelves, which I don't think was an empty threat, as this guy was actually captured on CCTV placing Izaki Glyco chocolates onto a store shelf. This image was released to the public, but the man was never identified. None of these poisoned sweets or candies were ever found, but regardless, a ton of their products were removed from store shelves, and over 450 part-time workers were fired, I'm guessing for security reasons, as they didn't really know who was poisoning these foods. And months later, the Monster with 21 Faces issued a message saying that they had forgiven Glyco, and from then on, all the letters and harassment actually stopped. They never did find out who was responsible for these attacks, or who the Monster with 21 Faces actually was, but by the end of this entire ordeal, Glyco had reportedly lost nearly $130 million in decreased sales and revenue. So you'd think that would be the end of it, but it wasn't. The Monster with 21 Faces was done with Glyco, but it then turned its focus to another food processing company, Morinaga. They sent a letter to Mitsuo Yamada, who was the vice president of Morinaga at the time, and again threatened Morinaga with the poisoning of some of their products. The letter read, "To President, you saw our power, didn't you? If you disobey us, we will destroy your company. You will get killed. Decide whether you want to give us money, or do you want to see your company destroyed? Tell us in the Mainichi newspaper on either the 5th or 6th of November. Use the missing persons. Use these words in the reply. Jiro Morinaga, mother, police, bad friend, money, meal. As we said before, we want 200 million yen. Monster with 21 Faces." Morinaga responded to the criminals by, as they requested, posting a missing persons ad in the newspaper. The ad read, "Dear Jiro, bad friend disappeared. Come back. Warm meal is waiting. Mother Chiyoko." They agreed to pay the Monster with 21 Faces, and while dropping off the requested money at a train station, this man was spotted seemingly watching the whole drop-off. He was trailed by the police but was eventually lost, and he was never identified. By the end of all of this, and after following up on over 28,000 tips, and after investigating nearly 125,000 persons of interest, no one behind the Monster with 21 Faces was caught or identified. And at his apparent shame of failure to catch these people, the Superintendent Yamamoto of the Shiga Prefecture ended his own life by self-immolation, which is a pretty horrific way to go. The final letter from the Monster to the media read as follows. "Yamamoto of Shiga Prefecture Police died. How stupid of him. We've got no friends or secret hiding place in Shiga. It's Yoshina or Shikata who should have died. What have they been doing for as long as 1 year and 5 months? Don't let bad guys like us get away with it. There are many more fools who want to copy us. No career Yamamoto died like a man. So we decided to give our condolence. We decided to forget about torturing food making companies. If anyone blackmails any of the food making companies, it's not us, but someone copying us. We are bad guys. That means we've got more to do than bullying companies. It is fun to lead a bad man's life. The Monster with 21 Faces." If you are enjoying this video, you may enjoy many more, as I do weekly videos exploring many dark, mysterious, fascinating, and interesting things. So if that sounds like your cup of tea, hit the subscribe button and the bell icon so you are notified for every video that goes out. Tip the like button if you are liking the video so far, but for now, let's get back to the video. 0888 888 888. First of all, this annoys me as there are 9 8s and not 8 8s, but this was a Bulgarian phone number that was suspended forever because everyone who had the phone number strangely died. The first owner of the phone number was the CEO of the telephone number issuing company, and he was Vladimir Grashnov, who died of cancer in 2001. But this was suspected to be a radioactive poisoning by a rival company. Then a member of the mafia, Konstantin Dimitrov, took the number and was killed by an assassin in the Netherlands in 2003. Then in 2005, the number went to Konstantin Dishliev, who was subsequently killed outside an Indian restaurant in Bulgaria. And can I just say, this whole thing reminds me of something like the Elder Wand in Harry Potter, where somehow this telephone number gives you these crazy powers or something, and people are just like killing each other left and right to get the telephone number, but it's probably not that. And so after these deaths, the telephone number was suspended and never put back online. Whoever calls it gets the same outside of network coverage message, and it doesn't look like the telephone number will ever be made available again. The 1994 Ruwa UFO Incident. This is a reference to the UFO sighting outside of Ruwa, Zimbabwe in 1994. There were 62 pupils between the ages of 6 and 12 that said that they saw a silver alien craft descend from the sky and land on a field nearby their school. Now, as we all know, kids never lie about anything or are wrong about anything whatsoever. So when a bunch of these children also claimed that some creatures dressed in black came out of the craft and spoke to them telepathically about the environment, we should absolutely, unequivocally believe them always. The incident went out on local radio and quickly became the most famous UFO sighting in the whole of Africa. Pretty strange one, but I think if aliens truly cared about our environment, they wouldn't be crimping all of our bloody corn just to make shapes in a field. Abigail Williams is an interesting one. This was a 12-year-old girl who, along with her 9-year-old friend Betty Paris, were the first children to falsely accuse their neighbors of witchcraft in 1692, and these accusations eventually led to the Salem witch trials. 3 women were arrested in this incident, one of which being the household slave of the Paris family. She was apparently tormenting the children in the Paris household with her specter or ghost. So yeah, pretty vague, unprovable accusations. The judge at the trial asked the children to look upon this woman, and all of the children said that yes, her specter had tormented them. God, people were fucking stupid in those days. The judge asked her why she was tormenting these children with her specter, and she basically said, look, I don't know what you're talking about. You brought me here, and I don't know anything about a specter. I am, of course, paraphrasing that, but that is basically the gist of what she said. The 3 women were interrogated and essentially turned against each other, with each woman thinking that they could escape these insane charges if they just said that the other women were witches. This kind of worked, and all 3 women were kept in jail. 1 died in prison, 1 was executed that year, and the Paris house slave was released from jail a year later, and then sold on. So yeah, pretty nutso one. And it's kind of wild to think that this whole Salem witch trials thing actually happened, but it did, and it was a strange time. Agatha Christie's disappearance. So Agatha Christie was pretty cool. For those who don't know, she is incredibly well known for her mystery novels, such as Murder on the Orient Express and Death on the Nile, featuring the famous Belgian detective Hercule Poirot. Born Agatha Mary Clarissa Miller, she married Archibald Christie, a pilot, when she was 24. The marriage was going well until it wasn't. Agatha's mum died from bronchitis, and shortly after it was discovered that Archibald was having an affair with his secretary and was looking for a divorce from Agatha. This obviously must have been very stressful for her, and one day Agatha just left the house, going completely missing until her car was found the next day. It was found in the morning, several miles away, having veered off the road into a bunch of bushes. Agatha was missing, the car and headlights were still on, but her suitcase and coat remained in the car. So it seems like we've got a little mystery on our hands. And obviously this was front page news. A massive manhunt was undertaken. A local lake, the Silent Pool, was actually dredged and searched, as Agatha often wrote about the lake being haunted in her novels. So maybe she had been attacked and drowned by by a not-so-friendly ghost. But she wasn't. Her body wasn't found, and the Home Secretary even sought help from fellow mystery writer and creator of Sherlock Holmes, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, which is a wicked move to pull. So this was like something straight out of one of her novels. Her car was abandoned, she was missing, there were some clues there, but nobody knew where she was. Her husband and mistress were obviously suspects in the case, but they were apparently cleared of any immediate suspicion, and the case apparently just hit a dead end. Until 10 days later, the head waiter at a hotel in Yorkshire, some 80 miles away, contacted the police and said that a friendly South African guest by the name of Teresa Neal may very well be the missing writer. Dun dun dun. I love plot twists. So her husband and the police went up to Yorkshire, and Archibald sat down in the dining room of the hotel and waited, and eventually saw Agatha walk in and take a seat at a separate table. And funnily enough, she was reading a newspaper, on the front page of which was Agatha's disappearance. So Archibald approached her at her table, and she was very confused. She apparently didn't recognize her husband of 12 years whatsoever. And after this incident, the two just went their separate ways. They got divorced, then later married others, and Agatha doesn't even mention this in her autobiography, which is kind of odd. The theories for this range from a big publicity stunt by either Agatha alone or by her husband as well, or maybe it was a post-traumatic mental breakdown by Agatha following the death of her mother and then news of her husband's affair and upcoming divorce. Or maybe it was some genuine attempt by Agatha just to escape for a little while. Cut out the noise of everything, cut out people bothering her, cut out the drama, and she did it in the most appropriate way for her by staging a mystery disappearance fit for a character in one of her novels. It was a pretty cool little story, but it seems like this is one of Agatha's only mysteries that will never be solved. Altered state of consciousness, also known as altered state of mind or mind alteration, or any variation of those words really. They refer to any conditions of the mind that is very unusual or unlike normal waking consciousness. Now, this whole topic is kind of wild, and it's very hard to pin down an exact cause or really exact outcomes or symptoms for this. The only thing that a lot of them really have in common is that they are non-standard or abnormal. For instance, these states can be brought on by drugs, hypnosis, meditation, traumatic experiences, chemical imbalances in the brain, just all sorts of causes. And they manifest themselves in various ways too, from delusions to delirium to psychosis, anxiety, paranoia, fear, but also in positive ways as well, like a stronger, more formidable mind, as is normally the case with stuff like hypnosis or meditation. The mind is incredibly hard to figure out and to diagnose. There have obviously been cases of stuff like Buddhist monks setting themselves on fire and sitting there completely still in the lotus position without moving until they die, which is achieved by intense meditation, and it's clearly an abnormal state of mind where they're essentially blocking out fear, pain, and just the natural instincts for their body to survive. And I mean, talk about an altered state of mind. I flinch when I touch a pan that's too hot. And then you have stuff like psychosomatic illnesses, where it's essentially all in your mind, but it also manifests itself physically. It's kind of strange. So say on one hand you have a physical symptom, say you fall over, hurt your knee, that is going to cause you pain, and that's something that doctors can look at and say, yes, this is the cause for your pain. On the other hand, you have stuff that is purely psychological. So maybe you have anxiety that your arm is going to fall off because you saw it on a late night medical TV show or something. So you start building up all this anxiety, but there's no pain in your arm, there's no tingling, there's no physical symptoms. But psychosomatic illnesses are kind of strange. They can manifest themselves in actual pain like headaches, body aches, or feelings of being sick, or even stuff like ulcers. But the cause for them is basically all in your head. So if doctors were to look at your body and physical symptoms, they wouldn't really see a cause for any of these. And that is essentially the power of the mind. So no matter what you want to do in life, control your mind and you are basically already halfway there. Proceed with caution, eat your greens, stay hydrated, and exercise regularly. I don't know how this turned into a motivational entry, but there you go. Batman fights Dracula. This is a hilarious 1967 Filipino film written by Bert R. Mendoza, and it was in no way authorized by DC to be written or produced. The story goes like this. There is a mad scientist called Dr. Zorba who is repeatedly defeated by Batman. It's just embarrassing. So, as mad scientists tend to do, he pulls a wild card and resurrects Count Dracula, even finding a way to control Drac, making him stronger and making him immune to the things that would normally harm him, like crosses and holy water. So Dracula sneaks into the Batcave and attacks Batman. Batman then attempts to use a cross and holy water on Dracula, but of course neither of them work on him. And I just love how Batman just happens to have a cross and holy water on him, because fucking of course he does, he's Batman. Dracula knocks Batman out, and when he wakes up, his trusty butler Turco, who is definitely not Alfred. I mean, they used Batman already, why not just use Alfred as well? But anyway, Turco tends to Batman's injuries, and then Batman and his trusty sidekick Rubin, who is totally not Robin. I don't know why you would even think that. They are clearly two separate people. Anyway, he and Rubin turn Dracula against Zorba, killing him. And the movie just ends with Batman lecturing a caged Dracula in the Batcave about justice. Bravo. Just a mwah of a film. As I said, the film was never authorized by DC, and sadly it is now thought to be lost to the sands of time. But honestly, this would be a great one to watch on a rainy autumn day. The Batsquatch is this terrifying creature. It sort of resembles a flying primate. It looks a bit like a falcon crossed with a bat, crossed with an ape, with a wolf. It was spotted in the 1980s near Mount St. Helen, and obviously its name is a crossover of bat and Sasquatch. Very clever. Another sighting was by a man named Brian Canfield in 1994. This was in Washington, and he was driving home when his truck suddenly died. He said a large creature landed down in front of him, human-like, 9 feet tall, with huge bat-like wings and blue fur. Pretty creepy, as I was always terrified of Jeepers Creepers when I was a kid, but I am pretty far from Washington, and I don't know how well the Batsquatch can fly over the Atlantic, so I should be fine. The Bear Brook Jane Doe is a reference to the sad and shocking case of the Bear Brook murders in the 1970s. 4 victims were killed and were found either partially or fully skeletonized. There was Marilise Honeychurch, 24, and her 2 daughters, who were 7 years old and 11 months old respectively, which is just incredibly tragic. These 2 girls were identified as Marilise's daughters, but the 3rd girl, who was thought to be between 2 and 4 years old, never was. She died likely sometime between 1978 and 1981, and was confirmed through DNA to be the daughter of Terry Rasmussen, who was the main suspect in this case. I don't know how she was confirmed to be his daughter but still unidentified, but maybe she was born and never registered, so they never knew her exact age or name or anything like that. I think that's likely what happened. Terry was later convicted of murdering his wife, Yoon Soon, in 2002 and died in prison 8 years later. So he was likely the culprit behind these sick killings, but we'll never know for sure. And who the little girl was and what her name was will likely remain a mystery. Ben Nevis screams. So Ben Nevis is a mountain. In fact, the tallest mountain in Scotland. So as humans and goats tend to do, they climb it. And it is a fairly popular mountain to climb for those with adventurous bones and souls. So let me take you to 2015, when producer Chris Slight was on his winter climb of Ben Nevis. He and a few other climbers were climbing a route called the Combe Gully, a beautiful but terrifying route up the mountain. The ice was perfect for climbing, everything was going well, until Christopher heard a faint scream. It was muffled at first and he wasn't sure exactly what he heard, so he stopped what he was doing and listened more closely. And not long after, he heard another scream, but this time more clearly. It was, as he described it, blood-curdling in the realist sense. He described it as if the person screaming had just witnessed one of their loved ones fall to their death. So much pain, so much loss, so much emotion. This terrified Christopher, as at the time he was just hanging on a small metal hook. and this scream brought him back to reality. It was no longer just a fun mountain climb with some friends. The very real possibility of him falling and dying up here flooded his mind. And that is to say nothing of the genuine concern and worry he felt for whoever was screaming. There was no way down from where he was, so him and his fellow climbers had to continue upwards. They shortly made their way up to the top of the plateau, but there was just eerie silence. And from then onwards, there was no more screams, no more news of what had actually happened, and other climbers not in Christopher's group had actually abseiled down from where they were to check out the screams, but they found no one and no evidence of what happened. And the police said that there was no reports of any missing persons, or any reports of deaths or injuries or accidents. So a pretty terrifying one to be up that high, hanging off a metal hook on the side of a mountain, all while hearing the worst, most blood-curdling scream that you have heard in your life. But with no body, no evidence, no incident, accident, or missing person, it seems like where and who those screams came from will forever remain a mystery. And that is all we have time for. I really hope you enjoyed this week's episode, guys. It was a little bit of a short one, but I am preparing something very, very spooky for Halloween. Stay safe, stay curious, and as always, thanks for watching.